Hey everyone, it's Sun Types, and Searching Sparks is right around the corner, as in, like, it's under a month. It's a good few weeks away, but it is coming up soon, and we know all the cards in the set, and I have looked at really all the cards, but there are some I haven't really focused too much on that are interesting. I've talked about the trainers, I've talked about all of them in a video, talked about all the EXs in a video, the podcast episode with Uncommon Fossil, and we didn't actually talk about all the EXs. We glossed over a few that weren't that interesting. But today I want to talk about some of the single prizes and some of the ones that I think are the best and most interesting. Starting off with Koraidon here. Koraidon is a Pokemon that's an ancient Pokemon, right? It's an ancient Pokemon that we have in the current Pokemon TCG with the Dragon Koraidon, and that card has seen some play within Ancient Box, but then it's not seeing like that much play in Ancient Box. Ancient Box is mostly focused around Roaring Moon. It's called a box deck or a toolbox deck, which means that it has like different attacking options, but it really doesn't. It mostly just has the Roaring Moon. You do have Flutter Mane, which is useful occasionally, but it's harder to attack with, and it's just a worse attacker than Roaring Moon and is pretty niche. And then you have Koraidon. Well, Fluttermane's not niche in general, but it's niche within that deck. And then you have like the Koraidon. You have a few different options. You have Great Tusk as well. I'm talking about the old Koraidon, but the Great Tusk is not doing any damage, and then the Koraidon is using fighting energy. But this Koraidon, well, it can do 110 for 3. By the way, this is from PokemonProxies.com, this image, and you have Intense Assault though, and the attack names might not be translated correctly, but the effects of the attacks are translated correctly. So if you've seen it and it's like called some other attack, that would be the reason. But for 2 colors, you do 30, but if one of your ancient Pokemon, other ancient Pokemon use an attack during your last turn, this attack does 150 more damage. I believe it could be a different Koraidon using the attack, and I don't remember if you can switch out or switch back in, but that's not really something that will be happening. But anyways, the idea here is, of course, you can use this mixed in with your other attackers. It's all colorless, so you probably just still play all Darkness Energy, and you have potentially for this Koraidon, maybe not 4, but you certainly could play 4, and then you have the 4 Roaring Moons, and that's 8 attackers, or whatever. If you're not playing Koraidon, or if you're not playing 4 Koraidons, it could be like 6 attackers, or whatever, right? You have a bunch of attackers instead of just 4 of your Roaring Moons, which you're relying on to do big damage. The Koraidon actually, previously, the other one could do 180, which is the same amount of damage, but there's two big issues. One, this one's pretty much always doing 180. Like when you're using it, you'd never use it if you didn't attack with another ancient Pokemon last turn. So you can use this Koraidon to go ahead and I do believe I'd like clarification in the comments. I forgot to look this up, but I believe that it has to be. I believe it can be like a different Koraidon. I'm not 100% sure on that one though. But if you, like, as I said, you want to use it after Roaring Moon a lot, and because you're flying on Roaring Moon as your main attacker to do theoretically more damage, but Koraidon, this one doing 180 is better because the other one, you need a full bench of ancient Pokemon, which was not great. You definitely want some other non-ancient Pokemon in play at times and the option to play those. So that was not something you necessarily want to be doing. And in order to fill your bench, those Pokemon aren't in the discard. You know the deal. You don't really love filling up your bench with just random Pokemon just to do more damage. I mean, you can do it. Trapco CX is very good, but it's not really what you're looking to do. But then the other thing that is the big negative is, of course, the fighting energies, and this is all colorless. So this is something that'll slot very easily into Ancient Box and make it more complete and well-rounded, because the weakness, that's a big deal here. Hitting fighting weakness, that's something that Ancient Box not necessarily struggles with, but I mean, lots of decks don't hit fighting weakness, but it's one of the better weaknesses in the game to hit because there are a lot of Pokemon just weak to fighting. You have Trapagos EX, and you have um I don't know. There are Pokemon. I'm blanking on them. There's the Lightning Pokemon, the Miraidon EXs, and other things in that. And there's a few others as well. But fighting is generally decent weakness to hit, and this is a nice addition to that deck. Next card I want to talk about here is going to be the Gastrodon. And Gastrodon here has a really interesting ability called Sticky Bind. If this Pokemon is on your bench stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponents have no abilities. Keep in mind, Gastrodon needs to be on the bench, and the Pokemon you're shutting off, presumably your opponents. You don't really want to be shutting off your own. That's essentially always bad, because the only negative stage 2 abilities would be stuff stopping attacking, which then they're in the active, so this doesn't matter. But shutting off your opponent's bench stage 2s, they need to be on the bench. So something like Pidgeot EX, that's one of the best stage 2 Pokemon in the game right now, and its ability is generally used from the bench. But if your active is knocked out, you can send up your Pidgeot EX. That's free retreat. You can use its ability, then you can retreat it into your attacker, and so you still get to use your ability. It causes some minor annoyances, but it's not that big of a deal. And Charizard EX, you can evolve that in the active generally, but not always. This is again an annoyance. There are some other good stage 2s. There are a lot of energy accelerators, and those will generally be from the bench, although they can be in the active. Specifically, Gardevoir EX can be in the active. Baxcalibur is not as good as the Archeops or um, Gardevoir EX, but it is still pretty solid. That one you can accelerate while it's in the active, but you might not be able to do exactly what you want to do with that situation. And then Archeops definitely is going to be a little bit awkward. You need to either pay for a treat or attach jet energy from hand and send up one Archeops, and you're almost guaranteed not to get value off of two Archeopses unless you're attacking with Archeops. So this is pretty solid there. Then you're also able to shut down. I'm trying to think of other good stage 2s. Those are the big ones. I might be forgetting some, but this is definitely a pretty solid ability, and there are a decent amount of good decks that you are shutting down with this. It's also a stage 1. It does have 3 retreat, which is really bad because it's definitely going to get stuck in the active. You need some way to switch this out, so you will need some switch cards. But generally, I think this is pretty solid and a tech option that you definitely might consider playing in decks. It's not like super broken, but it is pretty good. Next up, we have ourselves Togekiss here. This is a stage 2. Does not have free retreat, has 1 retreat. Togekiss sometimes has free retreat, but unfortunately not here, or maybe fortunately, because I'm not a big fan of this card in terms of its impact on the game, because its ability, which I think is pretty good. I haven't heard too much talk about this in terms of being particularly good, but it says whenever your opponent's active is knocked out, you flip a coin, and if heads, take an extra prize for that knockout, and the ability does not stack. So you can't just play a bunch of Togekisses and reflip or take multiple extra prizes. But half the time taking an extra prize, that's quite good. It is a stage 2. I said stage 2s are good, but they're also not like they're not free to set up by any means, and you definitely see some awkwardness with stage 2s. Oh, Dusknoir, that's the other stage 2 that's good. Dusknoir is definitely one you can put into the active though, because it essentially just, I mean, when you use your ability, you are now no longer in the active, you are in the discard pile, so you can then send out something else, but you won't always be able to do that. Anyways, Togekiss is definitely really strong when you flip heads, and very well maybe worth playing. It's also worth noting that it isn't a pretty solid evolution line. You have some healing on the previous evolutions and Togekiss as well, but you probably won't be playing that. But then there's the Togekiss that lets you draw till you have 8 cards in hand after you attack. So it's not a great card. I haven't really seen anyone play it, but it is an okay card. And this is all colorless as well, so it is an attacking option, and not a terrible one, as it will be able to hit something like Mimikyu and knock that out, or be used against certain other walls depending on what deck you're playing. But it's not hitting through every wall, not hitting through Cornerstone Master upon EX, and I'm sure there's some others it's not hitting through, but it is hitting through Noivern EX, I guess. It's okay there. Certainly nothing like absolutely insane, but it's okay, and that's kind of cool. I think this is a card that is pretty solid. It's definitely not a card I'm a big fan of the design of because of the randomness and the really high power. Generally, I don't love randomness within cards that have like very swingy randomness. If you're flipping 10 coins, or like if you flip 10, 20 coins in a game, flipping one heads versus one tails generally won't matter as much, but if you're flipping like 5 or 3 or 1 or 2, then a singular coin flip will mean a lot if it's a meaningful thing. If it's like you do 10 more damage, it doesn't really matter, but if it's like you do, I mean, you take an extra prize. In this case, that's really a really big deal. But I do believe this is a card that will be able to get put into play. I think it's kind of like Dusknoir, and the fact that it like kind of lets you take extra prizes. It's a stage 2 that kind of sits on your bench and doesn't provide as much value in other situations. This is providing no other value. It's not taking knockouts, but it's allowing you to put more pressure on when you do take knockouts in terms of just getting closer to winning the game. Next up, we have Meowstick. Meowstick's a really interesting card here, and it has Tempting Tail as its ability, and it says you must discard a relaxing teaser from your hand in order to use this ability. That is an item card that doesn't really do anything. To be honest, it's an okay item. No, it's a pretty bad item, but it does have minor value, but it can only be played turn one, I believe going second. And it doesn't really matter what it does for the sake of this ability. You might just never play it because you want to be able to use this ability because you essentially play the item to use the ability. And once during a turn, you wouldn't really want to like use this multiple times. You could do multiple Meow sticks, but that's not particularly good. But once during your turn, you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active. It's just a free Gust. Well, not free because you need to just discard the item, but it is not that hard to pay. And yeah, Meowstick definitely is a really strong ability here. If you just view it as like ignoring the item thing, which isn't super hard to find, it's just a free guess, which is absolutely insane. Every like multiple times throughout the course of the game. The issue, of course, is finding the item, and you could use Arvin to find the item, or use Irida to find the item, but is that necessarily what you want to do? Probably not. I mean, Irida is not like that bad to use specifically within water-based decks, but using it within like Arvin, I mean, you could just play boss. That's like kind of an oversimplification. Arvin's obviously doing different things. There's a lot of stuff to say about Arvin. So a lot of it's been said, but it is definitely a really powerful card that you don't just want to be throwing away all the time as your supporter for the turn, and just using it as like a gust effect. We're also playing these other cards which are like clogging up your deck the rest of the time. So Tempting Tail is not a perfect ability, but it is pretty good. It's on stage one. Right now, stage ones are pretty bad. There aren't too many particularly good ones. There are some that are okay and some that are like mediocre. I don't actually know which is better, okay or mediocre. I think okay is better, but there aren't really any that are particularly game defining. Like Barrel's good. Maybe I'm blanking on some. I mean, there are some that like see play, but they're mostly played for their stage twos. Even something like Dusclops is played for the stage two mostly right now. And then there are V stars, which are good, but they're not stage ones. So Meowstick though is a card that I think is going to be one of the best cards from this set. I'm not making this into a tier list. I might make it into a tier list at some point, but I'd say it's probably an A tier card. I don't think it's quite an S tier card, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's one of the best Pokemon in this set, certainly in my opinion. Then we have Chimpa. Chimpa is another pretty versatile card. This is a basic Pokemon with its ability Snow Sink. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, so you cannot use Nest. Well, you can use Nest Ball, but the ability won't trigger, which is bad. That's the whole reason to play this card. But when you play it from your hand onto your bench, you may discard a Stadium and play. You could also search this with Irida. I mentioned Irida having a water Pokemon with versatility is really nice. Irida will be rotating a few months after these cards come out, but it is still something that worth mentioning, and will add arguably another layer of depth to Irida decks, Irida as a supporter, because Irida decks are generally thought of as water decks. You could say they're Frostlass decks. You could say, oh, well, Frostlass is an Irida deck. Chimpa EX with Excalibur is an Irida deck. And speaking of that, you could attack with this Pokemon as well. It's not particularly good. I think it's less than Excalibur, but it is a usable attack, which might be what you want. Probably it's not what you want to do, but it is an option. And it's like not very good in Frostlass because you're damaging yourself. But there are also decks that just throw in Irida because Arvin, the item search is really the reason you play Arvin, plus Forest Stone as well. Maybe Sparkling Crystal or whatever. You might have a tool that you want, but generally decks don't have a ton of tools that they want. So Arvin's there as like an item search, and Irida can be used as an item search plus some value off the water Pokemon. Sometimes you just see decks playing like Radiant Greninja, Lumineon V, Manaphy for the water Pokemon, but now you could add Chimpa. You also have Iron Bundle, so you get some solid value out of the water Pokemon. Nothing absolutely insane, but something that is, solid and something that can be nice. It's like Lost Vacuum. Lost Vacuum can also get rid of a tool, but getting a searchable Stadium Bump is nice. This is searchable off of Ultra Ball. As I said, not really searchable off of Nest Ball, not doing what you want unless you have like a penny in hand, in which case you're using an item and a supporter to just bump a Stadium, which is not very good. It does have one retreat, which is it's not free retreat, but it is nice having just one retreat, so you are able to not get stuck to the level of like Gastrodon or really a lot of cards. It's nice to have one retreat, and so that will mean that you could play this in a lot of decks and not be super worried about getting boss trapped. I mean, maybe you're a deck that is still worried about it, but most of the time I feel like it's not really an issue here. And the bench space is I was gonna say something about like Area Zero Underdepths. You could actually like combo this with Area Zero Underdepths to do some like really weird stuff, but generally the bench space might be a bit of an issue. You don't really want to be playing multiple Chimpows ever. And if you're playing Chimpow, I mean, it's one of those Pokemon that has non-playability like Lumineon V, so you don't want to be playing like a ton of these Pokemon with non-playabilities because you'll end up starting them and you'll end up, of course, playing them, and all of a sudden, oh no, all your bench space is gone. But I do believe that this card will see some play. Lost Vacuum will be rotating. Of course, you could always just bump stadiums with other stadiums, and a lot of decks have a stadium that is solid for them in the game. Not necessarily like super great, but I mean, Artizone, that's a card that's pretty good in, I think, a lot of decks. I mean, it has value in most decks, but of course, then it has value to your opponent as well. But anyway, Chimp is definitely going to be a solid stadium. Speaking of stadiums, Artizone is, not getting this to trigger the ability, but Misugoza could, but that's a coin flip. That's just like a random thing. Figured it's kind of worth mentioning. But Chimp definitely a card that is one that will see play, and it won't be a super impactful card, a super interesting card, but is a card that will see the highest, competitive play at the highest level. Then we have another water Pokemon here, Whaleren. This is a card I really have not talked about much. I talked about it a little bit, but just a little bit. And the second attack, 170 for 2 is okay, is certainly not bad. But what we're looking at here is Frozen Fangs, and it says, for 1 water, during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon with 2 or fewer energy cannot attack. And it says in parentheses, this also includes new Pokemon that come into play on your opponent's turn, which I don't really know why that needs to be clarified, but it does say that. But this is pretty nice, theoretically stopping certain decks like entirely or mostly. I talked about some before, and I was like, decks can get a third energy on, but it is definitely going to be stretching their energy thin. If you're looking at a deck like Charizard EX, if they have to attach a third energy, that's, I don't know, how many energies do they play? Like 6? I was thinking they played 6, but they might play more than that. But if they have to attach half their energy to one Pokemon, that's a lot, right? And if you look at, because Charizard EX can do that. They can play their Charizard EX Accelerate 3 energy. They can just do that. And if this is certainly something that your opponent will see coming because it's a stage 2, right? I mean, even that's true for stage 1s as well, but you are not just like popping and surprising your opponent unless you're not paying that much attention. But if they're a deck like Reachable Ogerpon, they can't really get a third energy on. That's just not really an option. So all of a sudden they can't attack that turn. They can attack eventually, but they can't really attack now unless they play maybe Sandy Shocks EX, which can get a third energy on if you've taken 2 prizes already. But this is a solid like pseudo control card that, or more so, I'd describe it kind of like a stall card. I don't know. This is one of those cards that's like, oh, is it stall or is it control? Actually, no, it's control. I think it's kind of like Snorlax, which is like, I mean, Snorlax is definitively like a trapping card, right? But this is a stopping them from attacking card, and definitely one that will be annoying and you can set up. It's not like, you're looking at stage 2s. I say this about a lot of stage 2s, and like you're comparing it to other very good stage 2s in the game. If you want to see play, you got to be the best at what you can do, and this is something unique though. But it is still a stage 2, and would you be better just knocking out your opponent's Pokemon or doing big damage with something like Charizard DX or whatever? Maybe. Certainly in a lot of situations. Like, this isn't just a better card than Charizard DX or anything like that, but it is a card that will be able to apply pressure in weird ways to your opponent that they might not really be able to react to particularly well, and is a card that I would consider that I could imagine seeing play because of its weird attack. And I don't think we've really seen stuff like this before. Maybe we have, but I'm not really familiar with it. If we have recently and it just hasn't seen play, then that's probably not a good sign for this card. But Whalem definitely seems like a scary card for some decks, Conkeldurr, but other decks as well. And definitely something that could be a pain point for decks that are pretty limited. Dragapult as well. Can't just accelerate. You can't really accelerate much energy at all. You have Sparkling Crystal, but that's not accelerating energy. That's just reducing your attack cost, which isn't really doing anything for you here. So you have like Crispin, and you probably have like one of that. And then there are lots of decks with lots of energy acceleration as well, like Gardevoir. This is not doing anything, but it is a cool stage 2. It is a stage 2 with a specific energy type, so this isn't really being teched into lots of other decks super easily, but it is a cool card. Then we have Magneton. This is a pretty interesting Stage 1 Lightning Pokemon here with its ability Overvolt Discharge once during your turn. I don't know why it says that, but you may attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon in any way you like. And if you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. There are multiple Lightning well, Terras, but Stellars. You have Pikachu EX, which is not out yet, but will be coming out, and Magneton might be the best way to play that. Then you also have the Galvantula EX, which if you've played it, it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. It's very weird and kind of hard to set up, but this is a way to set up pretty easily. Getting 2 stage 1s into play, a few energies in the discard isn't like super free, but isn't super hard either. Definitely something you will be able to do. And then you're setting up and incredibly powerful attacker that you will need to, like, I believe both of them discard all the energies attached with their stellar attack, so that is a that's an issue. But I do believe that Magneton is pretty strong. You could also just play this in like Miraidon or something, and obviously Miraidon's a deck that needs energy in play, and this gets it in play, right? And it's not great to give up 1 prize, but it's not that big of a deal either if your opponent's just playing a very linear deck. AK1 not playing something like Dusknoir and or Briere, because those will take an extra prize there, but if not, they got to knock out 3 2-prizers still, which is what they would have to knock out anyways. And now they're actually more vulnerable to Ionas and stuff like that. So Magneton is definitely a really cool card just in Lightning decks as a simple tech option, or not necessarily tech option, but like it's something that you play like a 2-2 line of, or maybe even a 1-1 line of, or whatever. And the basic is searchable off of Miraidon EX and Buddy Buddy Poffin as well. And it's a cool and solid evolution line as well. I'm not super familiar with what. Oh, you got like the Control Magneton, and you have the Magnezone EX. So you got some pretty cool things. You have the Metal Magnezone as well, but that's probably never something you're going to mess around with together with these guys. But definitely something really, really solid here. And a card that also knocks itself out, which we've seen a few of lately, and they're kind of scary. Dusknoir is definitely a very, very impactful Pokemon right now, and a little annoying, to be honest, as well. Then we have the Lake Trio, I believe is what these 3 are called. We have Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, and they are each 70 HP, which is really, really nice because you can Buddy Buddy Pop them for them. Basic Pokemon, they need to be basics as well, and you can just Buddy Buddy Pop them for 2 of them, and they have these attacks for psychic energies. You got Uxie. Uxie is really, really, really solid. For 1 psychic, put 2 damage cards on each of your opponent's Pokemon. This is really simple, really straightforward, and is going to be hitting a good chunk of damage here to your opponent's board, assuming they have a bunch of bench Pokemon. And of course, there are going to be ways to stop this, but you can obviously just get value off of this and do really solid damage there. Then you can also build off of this with other things. Sorry, I got distracted by something. But yeah, it's a good spread attacker. You look at other spread attackers like Spinda, or that's probably a terrible example. Spinda, Yveltal, there's really Kofakugus, but I'm not talking about that one in today's video. I think it's not that good. There are other ones like, I mean, obviously stuff like Dragapult EX. This is not really comparable to that. It's faster, obviously weaker, but it can actually do more spread damage as well. Then there's much like Stellars that are spread attackers as well. But you do have Uxie, which is definitely going to be a really solid card in spread decks, being better than Yveltal. Yveltal is probably the best one right now. It's just 20 to each, or just 2 damage cards on each of your opponent's Pokemon with damage cards already on it. So this is just objectively better. It does have less HP, but is Buddy Buddy Puff unsearchable. Then we have Mesprit. This one is just pretty solid for 2 Psychic. You do 160 if you have Uxie and Zelf on your bench. Theoretically, you could play these with a Ditto Box style deck, and you like copy that. Again, Ditto will be rotating, but whatever, that's whatever, I'm not gonna think about that. But yeah, you have the solid damage, but 160 is not like absolutely insane, but it's pretty good. And I don't know exactly how you get the energy on. There are different ways. Maybe Zadu. I've played Zadu Spread Box. It's okay, though kind of sketchy. But Mesprit is, you need a big attacker that isn't reliant on weird things, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Mesprit definitely is a Pokemon. Well, it's relying on bench Pokemon, but that's just a Buddy Buddy Poffin, assuming they're not all one-ofs, which I would not do. You definitely want to be semi-focused on the Lake Trio. Then we have a Zelf here. Zelf is the theoretical one-shot Pokemon that is like super strong, but also kind of weird, and it has Mind Kinesis for Psychic Colorless, 10 more damage for each damage count on your opponent's Pokemon, like in total. That is really, really strong, allowing you to potentially hit a lot. I don't know how much you're realistically hitting, but let's say you attack with Uxie 3 times. Your opponent has 6 Pokemon in play. Um, then you're going to be hitting 370, I believe, if I'm not yeah, 370, which is a lot. That's one shot and everything. Obviously, that's like not necessarily what's going to happen really at all. You might take knockouts. You're actually doing less damage. They might not have that many bench Pokemon. They might have more bench Pokemon. That's possible as well. So I think Uxie plus this is a card that there's a Mimikyu like this, which didn't really see play, but it is a card that I've played with, and it is theoretically really solid as a finisher at the end of the game to have a strong like an absolutely absurd one-shotting Pokemon at the end of the game, which your opponent just can't stop. Unsurprisingly, with a spread deck like this, none of these Pokemon have abilities except for Ditto. So maybe you don't play Ditto, you can use Frostlass and get really solid value. But these are definitely the cards I'm most excited for from this set, or some of the cards I'm most excited for. But tell me what single prizes you're most excited for down below, and make sure you like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.